Good, man. Great, thanks.
Yeah, thanks for having me here in your office here in Salt Lake.
Oh, yeah, thanks for bringing donuts.
No, anytime. I've always actually wondered where you kind of come up with your mad scientist work because, in all honesty, if no one has no idea what you do on social media, I I get lost because I feel like I need to have an English Oxford dictionary to keep up with you. Two, it just seems like you have like a jungle gym to play with.
Yeah, the in terms of like the space, it just made sense to have somewhere to train my clients, because I'm interested in trying new things and maybe challenging things that we do, and so I needed a place to do that. So it's fun to have the climbing space here and then all the toys to play with. But yeah, I think my background, and I know that's a problem. I try to not be as technical. Um, but I mean, as an anatomy and physiology professor in a college, it's, you have to break it down simple, but people need to know the complicated stuff, so it's like, I think I make assumptions that people understand more about physiology than they do, like when I post things on Instagram, right? So I've been getting better at making it more simple, but I totally can understand that it tends to be like confusing.
Yeah. Well, we're jumping right into this, but I'm not going to assume my audience knows. Well, everyone, in my opinion, if you're a rock climber and you don't know who you are, that's really weird to me. But I'm not going to assume everyone else knows who you are. So can you tell everybody who you are, where you're from, and what is your relation to, I guess, really rock climbing? But you work with athletes from all different disciplines, do you?
I work with athletes from other disciplines, but the majority of my business in the last 2 years has been primarily rock climbers. I come from a background of other sports. I grew up in Utah, primarily doing, the typical three-sport athlete. I wrestled, I played football, and I played baseball. And I was a pretty good athlete, naturally good at all of those, but not excellent at any of those necessarily. So a very general good athlete. But my primary sport was baseball. And so when I moved to college, I had so much sport in my life that I was just so over it. And I was lucky to meet some friends that were from Michigan that were outdoor enthusiasts, and a couple of them had gone on Knowles courses, and
Okay.
they were like such interesting, different people than I was used to, that I just like gravitated towards these friends. And these friends are really what got me interested in rock climbing.
That's cool. That's actually, it's funny. I think in Utah, you would just naturally have, it's just so abundant here. So like, just being like from Texas, I assume everyone would at least rock climbs and skis here. And it's a misconception, but that's cool. And I didn't realize that was your introduction. So it's kind of talking about your origin story into climbing. Like, what made it stick for you? Was it bouldering? Was it sport? Or was it like really, why did you like it and stick with it?
Well, it's funny you mentioned like being in Utah. Like climbing as like a popular thing is pretty new, right? Like around the world, and even in Utah. Like I would drive up the canyons going to other sporting events, and I would see people on the sides of the wall, and I'd be like, wow, that looks cool. And I always had based on my body type and my genetics, I was always pretty strong at like pulling. So I was a really good Greco-Roman wrestler. That was like my primary discipline. And so I always thought in the back of my mind, I was like, I'd probably be pretty good at that. That looks like something that would be fun. And so then when I met my friends who were rock climbers, I would just I went to school in Hawaii to play baseball originally, and we would go traveling around the island, just hitchhiking and going adventuring, right? So my real love for climbing came from the adventure. Like I really fell into trad climbing and didn't even really like bouldering all that much because it wasn't as much of an adventure for me as trad climbing was. So that was my primary interest in rock climbing, was into trad climbing.
So where did your, I guess, is there any place like fond memory kind of like, yeah, is there a fond memory or is there a memory that you remember the most that kind of was like, this really stands out in your mind is like one of your most favorite places that you've traveled and a place you'd maybe recommend other people to go to?
Oh, for climbing?
Yeah.
Oh, geez. Indian Creek is like without question my favorite place on the planet for rock climbing. When I started climbing in Colorado. So I moved from Hawaii to Colorado with a friend and lived in Crested Butte. And there's actually a really cool boulder field below Mount Crested Butte where I had no idea about bouldering other than there's these rocks and there was chalk on them. And I got a pair of shoes from a local store and just like would go out there every day and just like train. I was just like psyched to like learn how to move on the rock. And then after that, I moved back to Salt Lake City and met some friends that knew trad climbing. And so we would trip to Indian Creek every weekend to go climb cracks in Indian Creek. And so that's really where I became more, I guess, more of a climber officially, where I was actually like trying hard and, doing some sort of training methodology. So I really love Indian Creek, have a big love for Yosemite, because then when I became more proficient, we would go there in the summer, and then Zion for sure is probably now my favorite place to crack climb.
I recently went to the creek for the first time, and I was humbled very, 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 very quickly because I'd always kind of like blown it off as like, I'll get there, and I realized I definitely missed out on not getting there earlier. And I went to Zion prior to that, and Zion is breathtaking. That place is probably one of the most beautiful places I've ever been.
Yeah, it's very cool. And my like natural athleticism kind of catered towards Indian Creek, where you can get away with being less technically proficient in Indian Creek and still climb hard just by being strong. And so like, but then when I would come to Little Cottonwood and trad climb and try and climb the same grades, you would get destroyed, right? So it was very like humbling and interesting to see the difference there in terms of where you gravitate towards, right? And for me, like, you can climb hard in Indian Creek because it requires you to pull really hard, where on granite, it's not the same style, right?
No, it's not. It's a different animal altogether.
It really is. And so that's why I think originally I was like kind of intimidated by bouldering, at least here locally, because I'd go bouldering here and would just get totally destroyed. And you're like, wow, maybe I'm not as proficient as I thought I was, based on what you were doing somewhere in another location.
Yeah, that's funny. So now you just like eat boulders for breakfast, is basically.
I mean, it's just a function of like my life. And I have kids, and I really love spending time with my kids. And when I went to graduate school, I went with one daughter, and then I came back with 3 kids, and then we had our 4th kid. And so like I loved spending time with them. And when I came home, I went and did a couple walls in Zion. And it takes all day. Like
it does.
Gone all day. And I'm like, and there's another story in my life that I was in an accident in the creek, which is interesting. But then I'm kind of scared. I've kind of lost a lot of that, like, what's the word I'm looking for? A lot of that, boldness.
Yeah.
To like try at my limit trad climbing. And I tried to do that when I came back from graduate school in Zion and got scared shitless.
That's interesting because it's funny. I did a previous episode with a friend of mine named Justin. We call him the Wolverine just because he's a monster, and he's a new dad. And, he talks about, dad style climbing now.
Right.
And dad style is like, it's just really just go out for a quick half day, smash and grab,
right,
and you come right back. And so the question to him was, I was like, how do you still train hard, pull hard, because you still like to climb hard? And being a dad, and his big comment he's like, you have to redefine your definition of hard,
right?
And so I think my question is to you is like, have you felt like you've had to do that, and did you find that in bouldering, or what is that?
I maybe have a different experience just because I know so much about like training. Where for me, I'm stronger than I've ever been. Like even when I was younger, I just don't have the ability to beat my body up as bad.
Yeah.
But with like getting older, I am more strategic with how I train and the things that I do, which certainly like is really good because I can save more energy overall, but be very specific with what I do, so that can transfer better to climbing. And so yeah, I think being able to take my kids with me in the morning is just like the coolest thing to do. And it's not sustainable to really take them trad climbing or even sport. I mean, it is sport climbing, but I like hanging out with them and letting them try boulders and letting them climb on the rocks too. That's really what I got me interested in bouldering. And like with my job, if I'm working with rock climbers all the time and, interested in progressing or at least like having people reconsider how they train for climbing, like I have to like boulder hard too, and I'd never like really tried. It was always like I could climb 512 plus trad, but never like really tried to boulder hard, right? Just never tried. So
yeah,
that's really good to try.
That's interesting because I always, as a coach full time, I always feel super rusty when I'm not pulling really hard or trying really hard on a route, and I find that from a coaching perspective, I feel like I can't as adequately help my clients or my athletes. And so the same thing applies to you when you're working with and you're saying the same thing applies to you when you're working, especially with higher level boulders.
Yeah, absolutely. For sure. You have to speak the same language. You have to understand the struggles, right? You have to know where they're coming from too, directly, right? And I can cater to trad climbers because I've done that way more than bouldering. But when it comes to the nuances of bouldering, I've learned so much from like Chris in our PCC conferences that those people that have been in the trenches, so to speak, longer doing those things, you learn, you're like, oh, wow, I totally understand that now. Like, I get that now. Before you thought you maybe got it, but just takes time to develop all those, all the suffering and maybe all the things that you like, the hardships that come with a longer duration of a discipline of a sport, which is very, very cool for bouldering for me because for my age, I'm almost 40 and I've, lived here most of my life and climbed here a lot of my life. People that are my age have like exhausted the boulders because they're like, oh, I've been climbing there for 10 years and I know all the boulders. These ones, like, they get stuck. For me, it's like a brand new thing. Like,
That's awesome.
I haven't even explored a lot of the boulders. I haven't even been to a lot of the boulders. So it's still pretty new, which is kind of fun too.
That's awesome. So, like, segueing into your practice now, because I mean, I think everybody has a good idea of like who you are and where you come from. Exactly, what do you do to service the climbing community or service people? Like, if someone, because I know you're a chiropractor, are you also a physical therapist?
Yeah, well, I have a master's degree in exercise physiology.
Okay.
So, and nowadays, like when you go to grad school, if you go to chiropractic school or PT school, essentially they're very hard to separate in terms of what they do and their skill set and their knowledge base. So they look very similar.
Okay.
So, I had 2 years of physical therapy in chiropractic school, which is what physical therapists learn too. And then physical therapists also get like manipulation and things that chiropractors do. So for people that are my age that go to those graduate schools, it's very hard to tell them apart. If they were like, you go into a room and there's 10 people, you don't know what they do. They look very similar. So I can't bill as a physical therapist, but do a lot of the same things. But my real interest and my expertise, I would say, is in like tendon rehabilitation. That's what I did my master's thesis on. And so lots of connective tissue injuries, pulley injuries, finger injuries, shoulder injuries, is the majority of things that I do clinically for people, either in person or remote.
Okay, that's pretty awesome. And your practice, and how long have you been involved in this? How long have you been doing this?
I've been out of school for 7 years now.
Okay, then.
So,
and then has your practice always been C4? Like, I guess the question I'm trying to ask here, and I'm trying to think about how to word this here, is, let me think here. I'm kind of losing my train of thought. I guess, because when I've listened to other podcasts with you, you started your practice with your father. You started this here and this, and I guess the real question is have you always known this is kind of what you wanted to do, or did you kind of, I guess some people kind of stumble into this. Obviously, you knew that, or you were, because you also mentioned you were a professor of physiology. Was that what you were doing before? Yeah,
no, I did that with school too. So I did not want to do what my dad did, right? Like kids do. They're like, I don't want to do what my dad did, right? And then it became where I went to college and did an undergrad in cultural anthropology, which I was really interested in, medical anthropology specifically, and then human biology. And so then I was looking into options for graduate school, interested in doing social work, interested in going to law school so I could be like a public defender for like, cultures, like specifically the Southwest cultures in Utah. So there was all these like things to do. And then I had the opportunity to go to graduate school where my father was a teacher for no cost, right? So I could go for free under like a tuition like scholarship. And so from the practical standpoint, I was like, wow, I'm really familiar with what he does. I like that it works with athletes. I still get to be an educator and a teacher because I was always really interested in being a teacher. And so that was the path I went simply because it made sense at that moment. And so since then, it's been like coming back and kind of molding it into what I'm really interested in. And what I'm really interested in is like teaching people, I really like being a teacher. And as a professor, I was essentially I really spent time learning anatomy in grad school. Like that was, for some reason, it stuck in my mind as like the topic that I do not want to, forget.
Yeah.
So immediately out of school, I was like, I need to get a job as a teacher because I don't want to forget those things. Because it's really easy to forget stuff. You just stop talking about it and you forget about it. You know, the details, right? And I'm kind of OCD for like the details.
I can definitely tell.
Which is maybe an annoying thing, but that's for sure with anatomy. So that was like the objective there. But since then, like the C4HP, maybe the name thing, I wanted my office to not be like, I didn't want like a chiropractic clinic. Like I wanted a more comprehensive space where people could do strength and conditioning. They could do massage therapy. We have a massage therapist here. Do manual therapy stuff, which I don't really do, and then do exercise rehab.
That's awesome. Can we back up for a second? You had mentioned something you were considering law school, and that were you wanting to do like advocacy work or work like kind of? Can you just kind of like unpack that a little bit? I'll be honest with you, that would have never crossed my mind in a million years that you were actually even on that track.
Oh yeah. So like, I mean, studying cultural anthropology is like eye-opening to how unfortunate that the experience of those people were, right, in the world and especially in my state. And so, that just like led me to the idea that there's so much we can do to maybe help in that regard. And there's so many good reasons that people need to be on that path and need to give a damn,
Yeah.
And so I never really wanted to be a lawyer and work at a big law firm, but I did work at a law firm when I was going to grad school then. And that sucked. Like those people hated their jobs and they hated their lives and they made a shit ton of money, but they were not happy at all, right? They were so unhappy. And so I know I did not want to go that path, but I really wanted the education, to do it. But at the moment, it was just like applied to some big law schools and got accepted to one. And then I had this other opportunity. And so my wife and I made this.
All right, boys and girls, so let's talk about what is the fundamentally most important thing when we go outdoors. It is preparing ourselves for all things, but I think the one thing that we all forget more than anything else is preparing ourselves from the elements. We do such a good job of packing gear, ropes, knowing the topo, knowing everything. But don't drop the ball with improper gear and improper clothing. Beyond clothing, use the promo code ALWAYSREADY and get yourself the best gear you can possibly get. They make clothing for every place on this big, beautiful globe that we live in. So if you guys haven't already, check them out, beyondclothing.com. Use the promo code ALWAYSREADY. Save yourself a little coin and support this podcast. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
At the moment, it was just like applied to some big law schools and got accepted to one. And then I had this other opportunity. And so my wife and I made the decision. We moved to Missouri.
Okay. And then have you still been involved in any advocacy or anything like work here? I know like the big Bears Ears was a big thing here and that. Are you still able to kind of like, I guess, flex those muscles or like be involved in your position, like what you do here now and like just overall, your overall status in the climbing community? Because, I mean, you're fairly well known and I don't know, it's like, have you still had a chance to do any of that or has it not been something that you've been able to put as much time towards?
Yeah, I definitely haven't been able to put as much time towards it aside from like, being able to donate money here and there where I can, but like in terms of my time, like, I'm really lucky that my wife doesn't have to work and she loves being a mom. And so like I work for both of us, so it's like I have 5 people to take care of. So for me, it's all like work. I got too many things to do, so I don't have lots of free time, unfortunately. But I certainly like, give money whenever I can to those places. The Bears Ears is one of the coolest places in the world, and like we just went down to Cedar Mesa a couple weeks ago, and we're gonna go down. I'm gonna take my kids out next weekend, and like my favorite place in Utah is a place called Grand Gulch, which is kind of in the middle of Cedar Mesa.
Okay, what do you do there?
We just go hike and look at ruins. There's thousands of native ruins in that area that are not like in a national park. So you can like actually hike to them and see them and like explore. You don't go in them, but you can like explore them and like look around. It's so breathtaking. It's so cool. And there's so many places to go down there. So I really want my kids to know how important those things are and be able to, have that same like experience. I fell in love with those things when I was in college hiking in southern Utah.
So you kind of bring up an interesting thing that I definitely deal with a lot as a full-time coach. And I guess it's kind of some insight, especially for Utah. I have parents ask me all the time, like, where can I take my kids? Where can I do this? Where can I like adventures or things that I have? Do you guys have like a tick list? Because I have parents who ask me like they're going to go travel here, they're going to go do there, and like, and what is the age range of your kids?
My kids, my son Jack is 3,
Okay.
and like he went to all those, you know. And there's certainly more accessible ones, and there's ones that are further away. There's ones where you need 4-wheel drive, ones where you can get to in a van. So my 3-year-old, we were able to go see 6, 7 different sites that we hiked to. So that would be totally accessible for most people.
Okay. Then your oldest?
My oldest is 11.
Oh, okay. So that's pretty easy.
Yeah.
So now, are there any other places that you would probably recommend for families or people to kind of go to?
Oh, in Utah?
Yeah.
Oh my God,
Yeah. I mean,
Utah is so amazing. For
Texas is like a one-shot flight. When I got here, it was easy. So a lot of people vacation here from Texas.
Right.
And so like I get asked all the time. I have friends who are guides here. And so I'm like usually linking people up in guides. But people ask me all the time, either in Colorado or here, like, what would you go do? Because like we'll find a guide to take our kids, but we have 5 other kids. We don't know or 4 other kids. We don't know what else to do.
Yeah, I would not go to Arches National Park.
Really?
Right,
That's like on every single person's list.
But it's just like it's cool and it's beautiful to see some sandstone arches. But there's so many cooler things to do in Utah. And the cool thing about Cedar Mesa is it's by a city called Blanding, which is south of Moab, like by an hour and a half, hour and 15 minutes. And there, it's very rural, nothing like Moab, which is totally crazy. Mm-hmm. But outside of Blanding, there's just so much to explore that's like so not cluttered with people and cluttered with like cars and ATVs and all this shit that comes with like things like Moab.
Yeah.
That you can really enjoy like the desert, like, and really have it be peaceful. You know, if you want to go big, you can hike into Grand Gulch. It's a 50-mile canyon. You can go backpacking in there, which is spectacular, or you can do day hikes, you know, into other places. To see
Do you need like a permit to camp there or anything like that?
You need a permit, but it's really easy to get one. You know, you can buy like a 7-day backcountry permit, and it is. I think I've been down there 3 different times, but you know, you can it's essentially like hiking through a gigantic drainage ditch, right, with 1,000-foot walls. But every canyon you turn and you walk up a side canyon, you see like native ruins and like,
awesome.
You know, art on the walls. Like people lived there not that long ago. It's just it's such a cool experience.
That's awesome. I have not explored much of Utah, and I don't know a lot of that. Like I said, basically I've been from Salt Lake to the creek, and then I know nothing else in between.
Well, yeah, the creek is sick, you know, right? And you drive to the end of the creek where that's the southern end of Canyonlands.
Yeah.
There's very cool hiking back there too.
Right past the 6-shooters?
Yes, you keep driving to the end and it essentially dead ends at a parking lot. But if you keep going past Moab, just don't turn down that road going west towards the creek, you run right into Blanding.
Huh.
And that's where a big concentration of the native like ruins in Cedar Mesa are.
Oh, that's awesome. You mentioned earlier before we got on this that you've started coaching your son's Little League team, and you're like between managing your work and everything like that. And you also mentioned going remote. Which one is harder, remote coaching and working with athletes, or coaching your son's Little League team?
Oh, coaching my son's Little League team is the hardest thing I've ever done, without question. You know, because like I spend a lot of time with my kids practicing, like especially because baseball is something I'm so familiar with that for him it's really easy for me to coach him and get him to be competent. You know, so that's what it requires to like be better, or not better, but like competent at a sport and enjoy it, right? But I'm not in control of those other kids other than when we have practice. And some of them have parents that do the same thing, and some don't have that opportunity. So all my extra time at those practices are essentially trying to spend time with those other kids, which is great, and I love it. But then when you go to a game, you have 11 kids that you're stressed about performing well, and when they don't perform well, I just like carry that burden with me, right? And that's like maybe not. I mean, I don't know. It's the first time I've ever coached a Little League team, but I want them to do good, and I know how awesome they are. And then when they don't do good, it's so sad for me, right? It's so frustrating.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. I've said this before. My dad was definitely kind of like the nicest stage dad you had ever made. And I'll never forget, I was playing football one time, and I had caught the ball in an interception. Like I originally track and field, I did high jump, and I just jumped and caught the football, and I was like, oh, I have the ball, and I'm looking at it. And my dad's like, run. I'm like, what? And he's like, run. I'm like, oh. And I like start running the wrong way actually first. And then I like double
that's
back
great.
and go that way. And I get a little bit down there and I get clobbered and the game is over. And I'm like, how'd I do, Dad? He's like, great, let's go get ice cream. But during the game, he's like kicking trash cans, screaming, yelling like in the background. And people are like, your father is so upset. But then when the game is over, he's like, yeah, we're going to go get pizza and ice cream. We're just going to go hang out and be super excited. So, and now as a coach, I like literally sometimes I'm like hiding behind a trash can watching the kids climb because I'm like balled up in a ball because some of them, they respond really well when I'm just like, ugh, because I walk up to them and I'm like, I want it so bad for you that I wish I could pour the want that I have into you. And it's a good hurt. And then other ones I have to hide from because they associate my behavior with disappointment. And I guess I thought that, do you think that, are these kids so little that it doesn't even really matter? Or does that thought ever cross your mind?
Yeah, I think that's funny you bring that up because I would say for the most part, most of them have no clue what's going on in terms of like if they're winning or losing or how they're performing. You know, a funny story is like we were losing this game 5-0 in the first inning. We're the home team. Mm-hmm. So we're just standing out there. They're just letting runs go in, you know. And this kid out in left field is standing there. I'm in left center, just kind of like herding animals. And he looks up at me and he's like, are we winning? And I was like, we haven't even gotten up to the bat yet. No, we're not winning. He's like, just like standing out there. So there's a point where it's like, got to be just fun for the kids. And, you know, I kind of grew up in, like we were mentioning, a different generation where it was all about performance. And like my dad was a really good athlete. And so I was like, you know, scolded or like frowned upon if not performing well, right? And I never wanted to do that for my kids. And so I've never like pushed my kids to play baseball for that reason. Because I'm like, I'm so familiar with baseball and I have so many memories from baseball that I don't want to be that dad.
Yeah.
But then my 7-year-old son's like, I want to play baseball. And I was like, looks like I'm being coached, right? But like, it's been a really good learning experience for me to not like be frustrated with him or mad at him if he doesn't perform like I expect him to.
So this is, I guess, kind of a thought, and maybe you already answered this, but I just want to like back up and think about this. So for parents, one of the hardest things that I have for parents as a coach, and now that you are a coach and a parent, this is an interesting question that I'm asking you. One of the hardest things I ask parents is I'm like, I need you to let me be the coach and you just pour your kids with love and affection. And I find that it's very, very hard for parents to cross that line. Do you struggle with that with your own kid, or do you see parents doing that, like wanting to like overly coach their kids, wanting to like not make it fun anymore? And then how do you diffuse that?
Yeah, that's a really hard question for sure. That happens to everyone, I think, that's wants to be a coach, that like has had the experience of being the athlete on the other side too. You know, it's really hard to not be frustrated when you know your children can perform better, right? And there's so many moving parts in a kid's life. Like, how in the hell do we expect them to perform at their highest level all the time? Like, it just is not logical. It's not realistic, right?
No,
but
not for a toddler.
No, and not even for an 11-year-old. But again, it's really hard to stop and think about it, right? And that's what my wife is so good at. Like, she's always just calming you down. Like, it's not that big of a deal, right? And actually learning to listen to her has been such an amazing experience of mine by being a coach, is because I do get overly worked up about like how my kid performs and how the team performs. But at the end of the day, the whole objective is to get them out there and have them make friends and have them do something that's fun and enjoyable. And if I make it not fun for my son, then that's defeating the whole purpose. And why the hell am I doing it anyways, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Big picture stuff. Like for me, like my whole life was always kind of built up to me going to play college baseball. And then when I went there, I didn't want to play. I was like, this is not fun. Like, I don't want to go to practice anymore. And then when you're in college, you don't have to. And I was like, cool, I'm done. You know, I'm going to do something else. So I didn't play.
When was that realization when you were there? Was it just like a day at practice, or?
Just when I got there, like whole team warm-up stuff, just like all the things that you had to do in preparation for, like it was in the late summer, early falls in July. It's just like, no, I don't have to do this anymore. I'm cool. I'm done. I'm going to stay here, and I made some new friends, and like totally flip my life and went a different direction. You know, still athletics is what I'm interested in, but it was really hard to do, really, like, especially for like my dad and my parents, but like ultimately it was a great decision for me, for sure.
I'm sure that was very liberating at the time.
For sure.
Yeah, that's like, I didn't go to school for sports or anything like that, but I can imagine the emotional burden of someone wanting to do that. It's like the same thing. It's like I have hard conversations with kids when they want to drop off the team, the climbing team, and their parents have been spending X amount of dollars for the last 5, 10, 12 years getting into it. And so I imagine it's kind of a heavy, heavy decision to make.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the whole, like, a lot of time and energy. And I have tons of respect for my dad and parents that, like, I now know how much damn time it takes to actually be there for your kids. Like, 6 hours, like, this is in April, it's been 7 extra hours a week that I spend with these kids. Like, that's a pretty big time commitment, right?
It is. It's massive.
You do that over 10 years, 15 years of your life. You're like, holy shit, that was like 2 years of my life just spent like doing baseball.
Oh my God.
So I don't know. It's been a really cool learning opportunity for me. I don't know that I think I'm technically a good coach and I'm supportive, but I think in some cases I get like too emotional with it almost, where like next year I think I'll just be an assistant coach and I'll just like be there to help, but not like carry so much of the burden.
From a seasoned youth coach, I will tell you this: more emotion is better than less. Because
yeah,
the big thing with
they need someone to give a damn ultimately.
Yeah, and the big thing with, like, I have to explain this to parents all the time. Kids have emotional complexity. They have emotional depth. Their emotional maturity is not understanding. That's it. Like, they're emotionally mature enough for where they are in their age, but they know they feel this way, but they don't know why this feeling is this way. And sometimes when a coach is super, super stoic and does not acknowledge the way they feel, or does not show emotion, or does not do this, what I've found over the years is those kids immediately start to invert and think something's wrong with them, or they think something else is going on. But like, what you're not doing is validating the thoughts and emotions in a child all the way up to the age of basically 14. Like, realistically, 14 is when it ends. But like, thoughts and emotions are one and the same, and in my experience. And so I would tell you the exact opposite. Like, continue to be that emotional person. You know, now you can temper it and measure it in different ways. You can deliver it to different kids and different things, because different kids are different with cultural and family and different backgrounds. But like, don't take the emotion out, because if you take the emotion out, they don't know what to do. They don't know how to read you, because children read emotion before they read words, before they understand words. Because how many times have you said a complete sentence to these kids and they're all like, huh?
Oh, every time. Yeah, that's good to hear. That's like, I like that support, because it for me, it like confuses me as to how much emotion I want to give these kids and how stressed out I need to be about this, or, you know, but it's funny because now that the season's almost over, like, and my son, like, he's so sad, right? For me, I'm like, oh, the season's over, thank God. Like, now I can like have these extra time, and I don't need to be so stressed out about it. But my son will say, and no, I was saying the other day, we have 2 more baseball games. He's like, oh, that's sad, I don't get to hang out with my friends. So that's really all he cares about. So what we're going to do is we're going to continue to have baseball practice throughout the summer.
Nice.
Just for the hell of it, just so my son has friends to play with.
That's
and
awesome.
It's fun for me to go outside, you know, and then every once in a while I'll be like, all right, kids, you throw to me and try and, you know, hit balls over the fence, like, just for fun. You know, we actually bent one of the kids' bats doing that, so I had to buy some extra bats. Me and a dad. But yeah, so I think the big picture thing, certainly, like, these kids need support and they need people to give a damn about their lives and help them, and whether it's, you know, me or hopefully their parents are doing it too, but I think that's the whole goal.
So has all of this experience with coaching youth, and I feel like anytime you coach anybody or a group of people for a long time, it cannot help but bleed into other areas. But have you noticed coaching this has improved, given you more insight, or done anything else within your practice?
I think not necessarily, just because most of the, at least a lot of my business now is consulting with people. Most of those people are adults, and so I don't work with a lot of kids like on a regular basis other than my own children. But I would say like just trying to be more simple, I think, is something that I need to get better at doing. Not making assumptions, I think, is another thing that I've kind of learned to not do, and not assume that people understand things that seem really simple to me, right? Like swinging a bat seems so simple, like just swing the thing level, right? But like kids can do it when you're, providing oversight, but then in the game it just goes totally different, right? So I think that would maybe be one of them, is being able to like make sure we kind of start foundational like every time at the beginning of every practice, so to speak. People need to do the basics again, because the basics really build on each other to make this more complicated, structure. Maybe there's an example for the swing, but
no, it makes sense, because I know I do the same thing with my clients in person. Like you kind of have to start from ground zero. And I know I find with adults, like basics is not always the simple basics for everyone is not always the same. I guess I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, because like a prime example that I always use is when I ask an adult to switch or match feet on a hold, the first thing they always do is a pull up.
Right.
And then when I talk to kids about this, I'm always just like, I've explained, and over the years of coaching children, I've always been like, okay, I need you to have orangutan arms. How does orangutan hang? And they just get on the wall and hang. I'm like, all right, I need you to now move your feet and do this. And they all do a pull up. And I'm like, you turned in. I was like, you're no longer an orangutan.
Right.
And it's funny. It's like, so translating that to adults is like, I need you to be as loose as possible. Like the moment you feel your shoulders or anything. Sometimes I use the exact same verbiage with adults, because I find that like, I don't know, if you can't explain a simple thing to a 7-year-old, then it's really, really still hard and complicated to explain it to an adult that has a perception or has a notion in their mind that they already do something well.
Right.
And I imagine that's a challenge since you're doing most of your work remotely and consulting. Like, how do you convey this? Or sorry, do you find a problem like conveying or getting the simple basics across to certain adults, or do you try to work with people who have a certain level of competency coming into it?
I think there's a mix of both, but I would say the reason that I'm so kind of biased now towards doing remote consulting is I think it's a better service, in my opinion, in a lot of different ways, because I get people's attention. Like they expect to learn for 45 minutes when we talk on the phone. If someone pays to come into an office with any healthcare provider, they expect to get some sort of service that they're making the assumption is giving some sort of fix or some sort of like correction in that short term, right?
Yeah.
But certainly anyone that understands physiology knows that that's not a thing, right? What makes way more sense is really educating people about different components of their physiology in their life, and then giving them things to do that are supported by I have another Instagram account for my clients, which is a video library with tons of other like more longer, like, lecture type things to reinforce ideas, and then exercises. That I think is just as good of a service, because the people expect to learn during that 45 minutes. And then they expect to take it upon themselves to actually do the stuff, right? Because in the context of like rehabbing someone, that's really has been shown to be the most effective. Like all the stuff that we can do in person might influence someone's pain in the short term, but that's not a really long-term sustainable solution for a pain complaint. What's way more important is that they learn about programming, they learn about different types of loading, they learn about how their sleep influences their recovery, learning about their dietary choices, like all of that stuff I'm really interested in teaching people, because those are the sustainable habit forming things that are going to help them continue to do their sport, for a long time. So I think in a lot of ways that's a better service. And now with technology, I have an iPad and some really cool anatomy apps and, an Apple Pencil, so I can like do graphs and it can be very visual, so I think and that's really what I'm more passionate about, is I still get to educate people, but then I still get to provide them with a good service that they can do, on their own.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed that following you online, because I've followed you for a very long time. And I've definitely seen you've always given out quality information, but your visual interpretation or your visual delivery of your information has definitely improved to the point where, and this is my big thing, is like you can look at an Instagram post and you can get a general idea of what you're trying to do, and then immediately you're more enticed to dive into the content and
Right.
the actual post. And I've noticed that has drastically gone up, and it's very obvious. It's very tell. So you definitely have been doing good work there.
Oh yeah, that's cool. That's good feedback. And I have no idea what I'm doing, right? Like anyone with Instagram, like I don't have a damn clue what I'm doing, other than these are the things that I'm doing at the moment, or that I'm interested in, or that I think might be helpful, that I hear from clients.
Yeah.
So you hear a lot of the same things, and then what I've always just done naturally as a person is just challenge those things for whatever reason. So a lot of the general rehab, things, like there's good reason to ask questions about those things, and then dig a little bit more into what other people or science tells us about those things, and then bring that opinion to it as well. Make sure the world's not so one-sided with its suggestions for what people do. So that's kind of what my Instagram account is about. But it kind of brings back to like making assumptions, because someone like you has been following me for a long time. Things like in the finger training programs or the isometric stuff that I've been doing for a lot of years, I assume that people already know that stuff, but that's totally not true. Because as a following on an account keeps growing, you assume that everyone already knows the stuff that you've been talking about for a few years. So that's hard to like stop and remember, because you get sick of talking about it, right? Like,
yeah, no, I mean, it's like, it's almost like running a restaurant. You have to ask someone, have you been here before?
yeah, for sure.
And most people, I don't think, have been there before.
Yeah, for sure. And I always forget that. I assume that people are familiar with my work, and then I can just like add on top of that, right? And Instagram's a kind of a stupid platform like that, because
It's not.
it's just like throwing it in there, right? And then, hey, you figure this shit out. And so I get so many questions. And when it comes to customized rehab, like, you could do the same thing for two different people, but they're not going to get the same outcome.
No.
Right? And so that's why the personalization of it really matters. So yeah, but that's all good feedback.
So if someone wants to read up on you, and like, I guess, so here's the question. If someone they just saw your Instagram, what is the best place for them to go to get caught up to speed? And so as you're posting more content, they have a better idea. And then I think the next question is if someone wants to acquire your services, what's the process by doing that?
Yeah, on my website, on the blog, there's maybe 7 or 8 blog posts that kind of talk about a lot of the things that I'm interested in from like testing standpoint and some of the training stuff. And then I've done a bunch of training beta podcasts with Neely, and then I've done one with Power Company, and then this one with you. So those are locations where people can learn more about stuff that I'm interested in. And then usually Instagram is a pretty easy way to get a hold of me. I try and be good at responding to people's comments for the most part, unless it's like the same people just like asking for information over and over and over, and they're like, then it becomes tiring. But but I'm pretty easy to get a hold of and try and be really responsive to people. And then on my website, there's easy way to find like consult stuff.
Are you still taking new clients?
Yeah. So the majority of my business is rehab. And so unlike coaching, where coaches, depending on the depth of the commitment, a lot of coaches will be in contact more frequently with their clients, where most of my rehab clients, I definitely can take more clients there, but I usually consult with them every month. And so it's not like and we usually converse via DM, Instagram as well, just because I like the voicemail function over email.
Oh, yeah.
I use that a lot. It's amazing.
I do.
It really is so nice. Yeah. So I use that as the communication platform. But I'm almost to the point where, it's hard to know how much is too much or when you're booked full, right? Because right now my life has been more busy than it's ever been in the last couple months. And so I don't know, it's hard to know when that time is to say I can't take any more clients, So at this point, but at some point I'm going to run myself into the ground.
Well, man, I want to thank you for your time, and I wanted to make sure we gave people an opportunity to find you, and if they wanted to acquire your services. And I want to thank you for allowing me just to kind of get to know you a little bit more, because I am one of those people who have listened to almost every podcast and everything that you've ever been on. And the main reason why I wanted to get to today to talk to you is like, I know so much of what you do, but I really wanted to know more of who you are.
Oh yeah, that's cool.
And that's like the one thing that was important to me. So thank you for giving me your time. And honestly, thank you for letting me into a little bit of your life.
Oh yeah, you bet, man. Thanks for following the like. That's definitely nothing I plan on doing out of school. You know, I plan on having an office and having it be something local. And I always wanted to. Well, I was excited to work with climbers because that's what I had been in love with for the 10 years prior. You know, and so I never like, and it was really random with Instagram. Someone one day when it was a climbing partner, his name's Bryce. Shout out Bryce Stockman. He's like, you should get an Instagram account. I was like, I don't even know what that is. I didn't even have Facebook. Like my first smartphone was, I think when I was in graduate school. Like I had a flip phone before that. Like,
Oh, dude, I
Alex
trust me.
Honnold style, didn't care.
If I could still have one and get away with it, I would.
Well, it's so hard because I can run my business from my phone, right? Which is
Yeah.
like amazing and shitty at the same time. So yeah, I appreciate that. Hopefully, it's not too ranty, the Instagram account, but it
It's
seems
not.
seems like a good place to hopefully provide information and not anger too many people. Although that happens sometimes too. But yeah,
If you have haters, it means you're doing something right.
yeah, yeah.
Thank you, brother.
Cheers.